Welcome to the Monday edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 140, and I have Alan Haley here. We're going to talk about Obama, of course. He's a spiritual person, I assure you. Today is November 24th, 2014. Well, Alan, it's a great day for legal scholars like yourself to sit down and scratch your head and say, how did this happen? Let's bring people up to speed. Last Thursday evening, Obama from the White House came up to the microphone and said he's going to allow amnesty for about 4.5 million to 5 million illegal aliens in this country. Aliens who have been here for 5 or more years or have children that bind them to this country. He said, I'm sick and tired of waiting for the Republicans in Congress to do what is right. Therefore, I, as the president, am going to do what's right.
What is wrong.
Do what is wrong. Kind of the ends justify the means justify the ends. A Nero moment, if ever there was one. Right. I thought, hey, we got a guy who's gone before the Supreme Court, has argued, has won, and I thought we'd talk about the ramifications and how this, actions have consequences. This will have consequences at some point.
Right.
So let's talk about what is the law, who gets to choose what laws are followed or not followed.
That's the problem here. Mm-hmm. We have the situation, the president says it's not amnesty because it's just his discretion to choose which laws he's going to enforce. Well, that language is not in the Constitution. The Constitution says the president shall take care faithfully to enforce the laws. And this is anything but acting faithfully to that clause of the Constitution. What it is, it's a kind of a declaration of non-enforcement that he's reserved to himself to decide which laws he wants to enforce. And even the ones that he doesn't want to enforce, what he does is he changes them. For example, like the employer mandate in Obamacare, he just simply moved the date back without Congress's permission. And in fact, I understand that the House finally has carried through on its threat to file a lawsuit over that, and they now filed that lawsuit, so it will go before court to see what the test is. But it's we have a system of checks and balances that's been in place for over 200 years, and all of a sudden now they've been thrown out the window, and it's a sad day when you have to take the president to court to get him to follow the Constitution.
Well, the problem with what he's done now is there really is no recourse. The Supreme Court can't really step in unless somebody's been injured in this. The Congress can't do a whole lot except pass a different law that he would have to enforce. And they certainly wouldn't do that before January. So they're kind of in this no man's land of we now have a Nero, a king, who's willing to do things that justify the ends.
Well, and not only that, but we have his enablers in Congress. They can't get 67 votes to remove him from office in the Senate, and so therefore that means that the people who would refuse to vote to remove him are simply enabling what he's doing and making it possible for him to get away with it and thumb his nose at everyone. And so as long as he has the enablers who keep him going, and Nancy Pelosi, and people like her in the House, it's going to continue to be lawless like this. But what it's doing is it's setting a terrible precedent for future times. You can see how this policy of non-enforcement could easily be flipped on its head by a Republican president.
Well, and I agree. I am a upper middle class person. If the president was Republican and said, I will no longer do capital gains tax for people who make more than $75,000 a year, I, as an entrepreneur, would be very pleased by that and would vote for him again and again.
Right.
But
so we'd have a government of laws that are simply at the whim of the person who's supposed to enforce them. Mm-hmm. And all the laws would be passed and on the books, but whether they get enforced or not is up to the president, which is not our system.
Well, both you and I agree that the current amnesty or the current illegal alien situation in America is broken.
Correct.
We have obviously open borders. We have a slow procedure to get into this country to become a citizen. We
Right.
agree it's broken.
It's incredible how the contrast between the bureaucratic way to get into the country legally
Yeah.
is clogged up and blocked so that hardly anyone can get through, whereas the illegal way to get through is wide open and open for anyone. That's what our problem is, right in a nutshell. We've got to close the border physically because a country without a physical border is no longer a country.
Well, I do remember 2 weeks ago spending 1 hour in Canadian immigration
Huh.
because I had so many different stamps from so many different countries on my passport. A couple to West Africa that really got them and questioned me. And, you know, other countries have no trouble enforcing their borders.
Right.
Iran, you don't want to accidentally go into Iran.
Nope.
Russia, there's all these countries where people don't think of being illegal aliens in those countries because they have extreme enforcement
Right.
procedures. We don't have any enforcement. We have a substandard deportation system.
Well, that's probably the most unfortunate thing of all about what Obama did on Thursday night, because it sent a strong message out to aliens to, come to the United States and we won't deport you. And yes, he says he's protecting people that are the families that will be otherwise broken up if that some get deported and the other members get to stay because they're here legally. Well, the problem with many of those families, anyway, is that the reason that the others couldn't get in here legally is because they broke the law in entering in the first place. And so they're illegal status, and it's not easy to go from legal to illegal to legal, as you know. So in any event, what he's doing is not really going to fix that much of a problem, and it's going to do nothing about the bureaucratic tangle that is keeping so many legal people from joining their families and children here in the United States. And so it's a solution without any kind of advantages to it, except personal ones for apparently for President Obama and his enablers, as I say. Did you notice, by the way, they were one of the quick people to jump on the bandwagon and say, "Oh, I agree totally with what Obama did." Is our other lawless leader, the presiding bishop of the
Yeah,
Episcopal Church?
the spiritually violent Catherine Jefferts Schori not only agreed, but said you did not go far enough.
Yeah,
You know it's a long day when Catherine Jefferts Schori agrees with your rule of law. Now, there's an ironic part of this. Last night he said there's just no way we could round everybody up and deport them because we don't know who they are. They're in the shadows. But we are certainly going to only let the people who've been here for 5 years, more than 5 years, stay. Well, if you don't know who they are, how do you know who's been here more than 5 years?
right.
I mean, is there just
We
as no?
didn't we didn't stamp their passports, did we?
So, you know, this is what happens when you go into lawlessness. There's a ridiculousness about it. Now, this is precedent, as Alan and I talked about, and there is a no-win situation here for the Republicans. There's not a lot they can do, Alan.
Yeah, as I say, with so many enablers in the Senate and the House, it's going to be difficult for a while, and we just have to ride this one out. They'll do their best by taking things to the courts, but the courts are not always going to accept these cases. It has the doctrine of when something is too political, the courts won't get involved in it, and they leave the political forces to sort it out. So it may take another election or two to
Well,
get the message across and get these people, enablers, out of office.
this does. We didn't get a chance to talk about the latest Court of Appeals on marriage that occurred, I guess, about a week and a half ago. There's a
Hmm.
Court of Appeals in the South that said,
In the
um, is it
Sixth Circuit, right?
Six Circuits that said same-sex marriage is not a constitutional right,
Right.
and this allows now, for the first time, the Supreme Court to do what they do best, and that's to take one Court of Appeal and the other Court of Appeal and make a decision based on that.
Right. The Supreme Court so far has stayed hands off on this issue, and now this forces its hand because it's got a disagreement among circuits that it's required to resolve. So almost certainly now we will have a decision by a court, which, it's kind of like the other carrying social issues as the abortion decision was when it was rendered,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't really solve anything. It just created a morass that's gone on for now more than 40 years of entanglement between the state legislatures and the federal courts, deciding just how far they can go and what they can do and so on. And if same thing happens with marriage, we're going to have another mess with the Supreme Court getting involved in something that it has no business getting involved in. Marriage is, of course, a civil matter for the individual states to define and decide. And there's no U.S. overriding constitutional right. That's an invention of the gay rights people, because the Constitution doesn't have anything to say about our civil life of the family and the marriage and things like that. Those are all local matters for local governments.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a local state can certainly do one thing and redefine marriage if it wants to do that. That's within the state's powers. But it's not within the federal government's powers to come and say to all the states, you have to do this.
Well,
that's
but
wrong.
that's what they did with abortion.
Yeah, they did. Yes, exactly. They stepped in where I think they had no race basis for it. And, today you still can't find a decent law professor who can defend that decision on grounds of legal precedent. It was made up by Justice Blackmun out of whole cloth. And that's the kind of social legislation that courts should not do. So it's an indefensible decision. It's never been defensible. And a similar decision on defining marriage for all federal purposes, supposedly acting under the U.S. Constitution, the Equal Rights Amendment, or the Due Process, the 14th Amendment, is just going to stretch language out. Again, we're in a lawless territory. If you can make the language say something like that, that equal protection of the laws means everybody has to be allow gay marriage, then what you've done is you've taken the language of the Constitution and you said, well, okay, but then what about the people who want to marry their pets? What about the people who want, that's equal protection? Come on. You can't just draw a line somewhere once you start opening the door that way. And there's no end to it, and that's the result here. You remember how bad it happened in the French Revolution. When the thing became more and more lawless, it eventually swallowed the people who started the revolution, and they all ended up on the guillotine too.
Yeah, nobody won in the French Revolution.
No.
It was just, and we get to these no-win situations.
Right.
Certainly, we're not to the point, and you
We're
never
not
know
quite
what
there
happens.
yet. We're not quite there yet, but
Yeah.
this is a real decisive day because this, as I said, you're either for the Constitution in all cases, or you're saying, we can do without it. We can make up the laws as we go. And there's no harmony between those two positions. There's no way to strike it. We're a nation of laws, not of men. We're a nation of the rule of law, and no man is above the law. That's the way our founding fathers set it up, and that's the way we should keep it if we want to, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, keep up what they gave us.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for your time, Alan. And, it was not our greatest Anglican Unscripted report because of the bad news, but oftentimes with church news, we have to bring the bad legal news. Once again, you have yourself a wonderful week, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.